Psychedelics aren't cures for anything. They're simply catalysts that we are using these tools to remember who we are, to see clearly the stories that we've layered on top of ourselves, take those new awakenings and awarenesses and insights into everyday life.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Harless. This is a podcast where we explore the world of entrepreneurship, stories of resilience. We also explore the world of recovery and the healing potential of psychedelics. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. This is episode number 78. I'm really excited for that. Last week was episode 77, which was a solo cast with me. And I'm going to be doing more of those solo casts. And if you have any, if you want to hear a certain topic or a story or something that maybe I brought up with a guest that you want to hear me talk about, please share and I will do a solo episode on that. So just to let you know, more solo episodes to come. Go and check that episode out. I talked a lot about the work I'm doing right now, which is called the psychedelic concierge work that I'm doing, or a psychedelic experience curation. Check that out. You'll learn more about the work I'm currently doing and starting to talk more about, so you can understand what that work involves. Also, thank you for liking and subscribing to the show on YouTube, and also leaving a review on Spotify or iTunes. This helps more people to reach the show. I've had a lot of amazing guests come on to the show because the show is growing and more people are sharing the show. And also the guests I'm having on are recommending other guests to come on. And it's just this beautiful synergy that's being created. So today I am really excited to introduce Matt Zimmon. And this is a gentleman who came on the show and really surprised me. The episode, I really wanted to dive deep into his story. And in many ways, we really dive deep into all things psychedelics, of course, but he really took the time to reflect and ask me really great questions. And in many ways, I felt like I was being interviewed. So this was an episode I really hope you appreciate. Matt has extensive experience on psychedelics. He's written at least 4 books on the topic. He has a great book called The Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics. We get into that on the show. We get into a whole lot more that you want to really maybe even take some notes. There's so much to this episode. I also become really vulnerable as he asked me about a journey where I became destabilized from and had to learn some things. And he asked questions about how I healed from that journey. So just an amazing guest, and he just has so much to offer. We talked about his TED Talk, which is got 1 million views right now, and in only 2 months, which is about psychedelics. So check this episode out. We're going to link that to the show notes, his TED Talk and his book. But hope you enjoyed this episode with Matt. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show.
Jesse, it is good to be here, finally talking again on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now.
Yeah, me too. I know we had a conversation a few months back, and the day has arrived for us to have this conversation. You had mailed me a couple of your books, which I thought was amazing, and for a guest to immediately mail out some books, and I was diving into one of your books. You sent me the book. Is it called? What is the veteran's book called?
Yeah, The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics.
The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics, and then here I have the Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, I'll jump into this today for sure. I got some highlights and some things I'm going to get into, but I really appreciate. You have how many books now? 4?
4 plus the 2 versions for therapists that I did. I co-wrote with Ken Weingard. Yeah, I'm excited about having those out there in the world too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm really digging this Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics. I've been in the psychedelic space since 2021, kind of went all in, and I've read different books, I've done different trainings, and your book is a really, really good foundational guide that doesn't miss much. And so far of what I've read and what I've seen in the upcoming chapters, skipping ahead, it's a really complete guide for someone, even if they're just going to be microdosing all the way to maybe doing their first ayahuasca experience, which can be a much larger experience. So great job with that book.
I appreciate you saying that. It was important to me that this book or these books would help people make an informed decision on whether they wanted to do psychedelics or understand why a family member, a loved one, might choose to use this tool, this technology, these entheogens, whatever you want to call this. And then if they did choose to use the medicine, how can they reduce the risk and increase the probability of having a good outcome from that experience? And that's what those books are really about.
Yeah, that's the impression I got when I was checking your content out before we did the interview, or not the interview, but even when I first met you, I got this impression, even with now your books, that you really take this approach to psychedelics in a very informed way that is with high regard to safety, which to me is really foundational for a nervous system like my own, which has had challenges and difficulties since I was a child, and being able to regulate my nervous system has been the journey of a lifetime. And so I've approached psychedelics in a way that is always thinking about, not in a fearful way, but it can be fearful, but a way that's like, I don't want to be destabilized, and I don't want to have this experience that can put me out of what I'm supposed to be doing here in the world through a psychedelic journey. So how can I get, really good information, access to good information, good facilitators, and just make sure that the dosing is proper and all these different things that are going to keep me safe. And so I approach my same way of helping others from that foundation of obviously ethics, but also safety and integrity, like you said, setting, like I've heard you say in the past and other podcasts. So yeah, I really appreciate you. And that was the general sense of, to just like I said, there's a general sense of grounded uh, presence that's really important when you're about to go into a 5-MeO DMT experience or a large psilocybin experience or just any medicine, ketamine assisted therapy. It's to feel safe in your body and then meet the medicine is can be really important, and I think that can be said with for other things too. If you're doing a cold plunge and you're freaking out and you're so scared and you jump in there and you freak out and you hyperventilate, that's not good for you. You might as well have not done the cold plunge. So if you can find a way to approach that, maybe with some breathing and relaxing and maybe getting yourself in a place that you're relaxed, then you ease your way into the cold plunge and then you come out when you're ready. I think that's going to be a lot better on your nervous system. And it's going to tell your body that, hey, this is an experience that could be a positive stressor and could be helpful. And so, yeah. So yeah, I appreciate the work you've put in so far into
I
this
appreciate you
space.
saying that. It's what's coming forward for me as you're talking is that this is the practice. Like there's nothing in life that's truly safe. Everything is about risk reduction and living through it. And we can approach anything with fear or with intentionality, with awareness. And what I try to explain with people who are curious about psychedelics is what is the relative risk of psychedelics versus other medicines, and then what are the things that you can do to reduce the risk for your journey. And then what you just said is really kind of a beautiful the next step, which is when you are entering into these journeys and when you're moving through life, how can I do that in a way that I get to experience it in the most positive way possible, even if it doesn't always feel good. Um, the outcome is positive, and we all have those. I have that choice every day, every moment, and psychedelics is just another area to practice with.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like it can become a natural extension of your journey. Psychedelics can be a part of your spiritual journey. It could be part of your physical healing journey, depending on the medicine, and it could also be part of the mental, emotional healing journey. And as we know, with severe PTSD or treatment resistant depression, can be part of that as well. So, but I think it's also just can be part of a societal norm, which hasn't been that because there wasn't any science to even justify why it wasn't. It was just more of the propaganda at the time because of the revolutionary thinking of hippies and people at the time that was, sort of disturbing a war machine and what was happening versus science of is this really helping? Is LSD really helping alcoholism? Is MDMA helpful? Whatever it was, right? And then, of course, got all thrown into one big bunch of,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know. So, yeah, it's really interesting as this emerges to the forefront of, for me, it's exciting, but for mental health, for addiction, for end of life care, just to see this unfold, especially coming from my background of abstinent sobriety and black and white thinking to the extreme, which I respect that thinking. But I also know the power of going deep into your personal traumas that's talk therapy alone may not be able to access. And so these can be catalysts for that. So again, having a beginner's guide, having a foundation, having this foundation of safety, I think is just paramount in my opinion to this. And there's no knock on recreational and what people do in that. Nope, not at all. It's just that's not the space I've come from. It's this is a different way of approaching it from a lens of many of the people I care about who are on SSRIs, who are struggling with their mental health, who are great people, have families, and they have success, but they have a lot of challenges that they're navigating in a really complex world. And I think, yeah, this sounds like I feel like I'm on a rant right now, but
You are, and it's a beautiful
yeah.
rant, and it's amazing. I knew this would happen with you. That you cover so much ground so quickly. Like if we were to just stop and just dissect everything that just came out in the last 3 minutes, there's enough there that we could talk for an hour on just those topics. Which is a testament to the amount of time you're spending thinking about this and that you're living in this space. And just to back this up a little bit, zoom out for a moment. We you said this could be part of the journey, and I would just tweak that piece. I love so much what you said, and I would tweak that to be this is, of course, this is part of the journey. This is part of my journey. This is part of your journey. This is part of all of our journeys. And it's what level of awareness do we want to give to these different things? So you mentioned catalysts. I love that expression. So if we stop thinking in Western medicine sense that these are fixes, and we think of these as tools to help us get into a different framework, with that we can have different. We can ourselves generate insights and awakenings and awarenesses. We ourselves. And then we can choose to take those insights, awakenings, and awarenesses and bring them into our everyday life, to bring them out of these special occasions and into the everyday sacred. And all of it is sacred, and all of it is the journey. There is no separation of any of it. For me, coming to that understanding of this as a practice has been incredibly helpful and incredibly freeing. That we do this work in everything we do. Just sometimes I do it with more awareness than others.
Yeah, that's a great way to put that. It's really a journey of awareness, right? Here, it's expanding awareness and awareness of what our triggers are, awareness of what traumas we've faced, maybe even intergenerational traumas passed on to us, and just becoming more aware of that. And I think the world has been exposed to a lot more of that because of COVID and because of having to go into the inside world of ourselves during COVID, because we couldn't we could distract ourselves, but it was a lot more free time to sit with our stuff. And look what happened during that time. Psychedelics started really picking up during that time. Even ketamine assisted therapy, things like that, really picked up at home. And we're in an interesting place now, post COVID, where this sits and where MDMA assisted therapy potentially sits, and the legality of that. And we're seeing Colorado and Oregon and these states starting to, really move this forward, these facilitator trainings and facilitators being able to serve psilocybin. And yeah, it's interesting, this point in the journey right now. It's a really interesting time.
It's interesting, and the work that you and people like you are doing is so important. And if I can take a moment to give some context to why I say that. If we take the past 20 years of clinical trials, maybe 5,000 people have had a psychedelic that way. Oregon, once it stabilizes in maybe 3 years, they'll move about 10,000 people through their process. We talk about the excitement around MDMA and psilocybin becoming legal. In the first 2-3 years of each of those, maybe 100,000 people each will have a psychedelic. Last year, 8 million people had a psilocybin experience, 2 million people had an LSD experience. If we take out microdosing, about 5 million people had a macro experiential psychedelic experience outside of those medical and therapeutic models. So I think a lot about, there's a person I respect highly who says, look, all the great things with psychedelics are going to happen. All the good things are going to happen. All the mediocre things are going to happen. All the bad things are going to happen. How can we adjust the ratios? And bringing intentionality to this work, approaching this with reverence, with respect for the power of these tools, approaching this from a trauma-informed lens, I'm very much trying not to do any harm. I think that helps adjust those ratios, and doing that in this space where most people operate, I think, is the greatest place to work, even with all of the legal challenges around it. Does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think it's good to have a balance of like where we're actually at with all this. What is the data showing? I know, like, from your TED Talk and some of my own research, there's over 200 colleges studying psychedelics. And, I think one of the things that I highlighted in your book, I have right next to me, the Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics. So one of the things I highlighted with all the great stuff I see in here, and this is also great too, but you put psychedelics can also make things worse. And I highlighted that because, of course, if people have been listening to your content over the years and my content over the years, they're getting a lens of psychedelics that's absolutely positive, but we also talk about the dangers and the destabilization and all the risks. So I'm kind of curious, psychedelics can make things worse, right? Let's just talk about that before we get into all this other stuff, because I think that's really important that said, because just like in your TED Talk, which we'll get into in a moment, the sensationalism and the panacea of what these can do, I think that's also going to be a big risk to this movement. And so what did you mean by that when you said psychedelics can make things worse?
I often point to this study from Dr. David Nutt at Imperial College, where he said, let's forget how drugs are classified, and let's just look at a bunch of them and look at the harm to self and the harm to others. And when he stacked up all these drugs, he said, the most dangerous drug to self and others is alcohol. And it was a 72 on his scale. And then he gets into heroin and tobacco and drug after drug after drug. And all the way on the right-hand side are psilocybin mushrooms. And he has those as a 6. Now, it's easy then to look at that chart and say, well, oh my gosh, psilocybin mushrooms are much safer than alcohol. Great. And I want to remind people that a lot of harm can still happen in that 6 where psilocybin mushrooms reside. So it's not about these drugs being safe. It's about how do we pay attention to relative risk, and then what relative risk there is, how do we reduce the chances of harm happening to me? And part of that is, well, where did your drugs come from? Are they pure? Are they clean? If you're doing ketamine legally, they're coming from a pharmacy. If you're not, do you know who grew them? Do you know who synthesized them? Have you tested them? So how do we keep that purity? Then the set is that mindset that we've talked about. How do we make sure we're in a right frame of mind for what we're doing, and make sure that we have people, whether that's a religious community, a coach, a therapist, or somebody on the other side who can help unpack what's occurred. And then the setting is the piece that's often not discussed. Yes, we talk about music and we talk about having a physically safe environment. We don't often talk about, well, who is there serving you the medicine? And do you trust that they're not going to take advantage of your altered state? Who is next to you in the room? And do they understand the rules of engagement for this? Because a lot of harm happens from the interactions of humans while on the altered state. So not directly related to the medicine, but really related to the vulnerability of the person on the psychedelic and the bad behavior of the person or the challenging behavior of the other person in the room. When we pay attention to those things, we've reduced the risk radically. And for some people, even with all that, they still have challenging periods of time following the use of the psychedelic. Some people can say, well, that's part of the process, and that's what they needed to go through to reach the outcome that's going to eventually come. Great. And there's other people who have persistent challenges that last a long time. And it can be very hard for those people. So coming into this and saying, okay, I understand these are powerful medicines, and it is worth it to me to explore my consciousness or to work on whatever it is that I'm working on, depression, anxiety, OCD, eating disorders, alcohol use, substance use challenges, whatever that is. It's worth it to me. I want to do this. Great. But at least you're going in with your eyes open and you're reducing the risk as much as possible.
Yeah, really, really important, really important foundation. And I think the people who have listened to you, because I've listened to a few of your episodes, and I've dove into, of course, your TED Talk and different things. Mm-hmm. And when I reflect back over this is episode number 78, and I reflect over the conversations I've had, that is the foundation. And one of the reasons it's the foundation is because, well, not only did I come from extreme black and white thinking, which I understand, but I also have been destabilized on certain psychedelics. And, that experience alone deserves maybe its own episode, which I haven't really get into. But at the same time, because that did happen to me, and more than once, I have this lens that is, I didn't have a family and I didn't have all these responsibilities that if I did during the 6 months of that process of being destabilized, it could have been a lot different for me in the outcome. So I think about that experience, which eventually got corrected. The experience got corrected, and it was a full dose experience of 5-MeO-DMT that was done in a group setting, and I had a really challenging time in the initial uptake of the medicine, and then especially when I came out, I started to loop. And if anyone has been in the psychedelic space or as an integration guide or anything like that, you understand there's a possibility of looping in a journey. And I looped what felt like for 6 days, never mind 6 hours. I just kept looping and looping, and I couldn't come back into the space and be stable. And instead of processing the journey, because there was 6 other people there, I just came back when I stopped looping, and I was destroyed emotionally and scared, but I couldn't process it. There was so many people that were up next that I said, okay. And I was the first one to go. So I said, okay, whoops, let's not do anything with this. Let me just sit for the other people. And that led to incredible reactivations, which is a term you hear with medicines like 5-MeO-DMT. And I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I would feel like I would go back into the journey, but I would go back into the destabilized journey, not the beautiful white light oneness. And that happened for months, and it was a lot. And I had integration guides I was paying. I had people in the space. I had so much support. But yeah, that was, thank God. And it happened again in a different way. So I'm glad it happened to show me when I first did ketamine assisted therapy, I asked the nurse, I said, how many journeys have you done in psychedelics? Oh, I've never done a psychedelic journey. Oh, how many ketamine journeys have you done that are at this dose? I've never done them at that dose. Wait, and now you're going to stick these needles in my... So it was just, it's an interesting perspective of being in this space and having some of the journeys I've had, and then, it's that's why, can psychedelics make things worse? Well, source, setting, integration, post into all of it. It's really important. And you just don't know what you don't know. And being as informed as possible and being with people who maybe have experience with some of the challenging journeys that can happen, I think can be really important and can, save a lot of pain, especially with people who have lives, careers, children, lots on the line when people come and meet these medicines, and yeah. So
So first, let me ask: you have not done an episode on this yet?
I haven't done an episode where I dove completely into that specific journey and then how I actually healed from that journey in explicit detail. No.
So, can we take a few minutes to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, I'd love to know, what would you have done differently coming into that experience, than what you did, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, number one, the dosing. The dosing would have been different. The dosing would have been much smaller. The administration of the dose would have been different. The preparation would have been different to prepare for that group setting, because I don't particularly care for group settings with that medicine, but it just so happened to be that. And the people around me were people I really cared about. So that's why that happened. That's why I went first. But the dosing would have been much smaller. It would have
Was
been.
that your first experience with 5-MeO?
No.
Okay. Okay. Was it your first experience with that facilitator?
No.
Okay.
No. So I would say number one, and this is something, recently I had Hamilton Souther on the show, and he talked about how Westerners, often get dosed way too high with ayahuasca. They get way too big of doses. And that reminded me of that's sort of what happened to me. The dose was too big in the setting. I wasn't settled before that dose came, and it was administered in a way that's the most rapid, fastest way of administering 5-MeO DMT in the world, which is through like a lamp that's mixed with argon gas and comes in very rapidly.
Yep,
You can, in 4 seconds, you could be into infinity. So, or you could be into hell, depending on how the ego lets go and how safe you felt. And for me, I got caught kind of in the in between, and then I looped for a long time. So that would have been number one. Number one would have been preparing and really choosing that. Do I really want to do this in a group like this? Do I really want to do it in that dose? And do I want to do it with that route of administration? And the answer would have been no. I would have changed that. I would have done smaller dose. I would have felt into that. And then if I wanted to go further, I would have. But I think there was a few factors that were at play there. And one of the factors was certainly my ego, because I was going first and I wanted people to know they'd be safe. And of course, what I didn't want to have happen happened. And with that medicine, you could tell I struggled, because I did come out of the, I did like open my eyes and I looked at everyone, and like there was definitely concern on people's eyes. And I also registered that as an imprint that something was wrong. And so many details matter in a journey. Even the people around you and their expressions, facial expressions, can imprint on the journey. So these are the nuances, a lot of things that might get missed and that are important. So, yeah.
So now, looking back at that experience, have you done 5-MeO since then?
Yeah. That was part of the Corrective experience 6 months later.
Okay. And what is looking back now, fresh eyes, backseat coach, whatever you want, what do you think of that experience now in retrospect?
Well, I'm extremely grateful for that experience, especially because I didn't run away from psychedelics. I didn't say, okay, these things are bad. They damaged me. I was able to have really healthy conversations about what happened over time. And then eventually have the corrective experience with an incredible setting and facilitator. And when that happened, it corrected the experience. I had a
Mm.
corrective experience. And then from there, it released in my nervous system and in my brain that trauma of that experience of being, you know, what I would call destabilized. So I was able to come back again. Um, and another thing too is I wouldn't have waited that long if I knew that that would have been the way to work through it, was to meet the medicine again in that way, in a safe setting, just me going, just a solo journey. But I didn't know what I didn't know. So looking back, it's a very valuable experience, and that's one. There was more than one, but that was a very valuable experience. So that when I'm talking to people who are going to be doing these
Mm-hmm.
journeys, and they're in the journey and they say more, I want to go farther, I want to do, it's like, really, you want to go further than being allness and the oneness of everything. It's like, it's curious because there's the nuances of too much medicine, or
Mm-hmm.
being overdosed, or not, dosed too high, or so that's kind of the experience of the facilitator, the nuances of training, which I've done. And no one's perfect. And I know people who are listening, if they've never done psychedelics, they might be like, whoa, man, I didn't know that, or that sounds kind of scary. But I think that people who have experience in training know what to do with that experience and can help guide that. And I think that's what happened to me. Eventually, I was like, okay, I'm ready to come back and
Mm.
correct this experience. And it worked. And since then, I've had a very different relationship with that medicine. And yeah.
Yeah, your two things are coming really forward for me. One is this idea of that I think if you haven't worked in this space, that you don't understand how many philosophies. Nobody's right or wrong. There's just different philosophies and how things can be done. And what I'm always encouraging people to do is ask questions and feel into it. What's right for you? Just because this particular retreat or this particular facilitator or this particular medicine worked for me, that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And it's very much a buyer beware um, type of process. So I don't use ketamine because it's easy. It's legal in all 50 states, and we have ketamine providers who will stick an IV in you, and you'll watch Fox News, and they'll send you on your way afterwards. And we have others that will prepare you and wrap you in a blanket and put a playlist on and talk to you afterwards. And just two completely different philosophies in what's happening. One's completely biochemical, one's biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual. Both are legal. It's a philosophy. Um, so that was coming forward for me as you were talking. And then the scarcity Western mindset of I need the quote heroic dose. I need the most. I need more. Um, that I know I was programmed with, that there's never enough, that there's always more. Um, and that with this, there's a lot of the energetic plane that's available at not very high doses, more than a microdose, of course, but the notion of I need 5, 6, 7 grams of mushrooms, or I didn't do the heroic dose and somehow I'm less than, or my journey was less than. I've seen plenty of people have very big experiences on 1.5 grams, and 3, and I've also seen people who take 8 or 9 or 10 grams because of the way their body metastasizes or processes the psychedelic, or because of the supplements or the prescriptions they're taking. So again, that whole comparison thing. And this is, again, the practice. We get to do all of this. We get to play with all of these things. Oh my gosh, I'm comparing myself to others. Even as I'm trying to go on a spiritual journey, I'm comparing myself to others. I'm feeling less than in this process. And brings us back to the practice, which brings us back to awareness, brings us back to why do we do any of this to begin with? We're doing this as we continue to try to remember who we are, to remember where we came from, to remember how worthy and loved we are, and to be able to move through the world with that knowledge and the power that comes from that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the biggest thing is, and I've done that too. Like I've done a journey and be like, oh, that, I can't believe that happened. I didn't become one, or I didn't, I must have done something wrong. I did the wrong dose, or I thought the wrong thoughts. I didn't do the right intention. And yeah, I think it's it's so interesting, and that's why even having one journey, that's great. And if the journey was challenging or if it was beautiful, it can set the tone for what comes next. And I think for me, my my nervous system was like really shocked in the beginning of my journey of psychedelics, but I stuck with it because I trusted there would be something more down the path, and there was. And thank God I stuck with it. And then the different nuances of different medicines and different indigenous groups. Like even when I met peyote,
Mm-hmm.
with the Wirakuda here in Costa Rica. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
what an experience. There was peyote that was prayed into for 60 years that they were serving us. I mean, that's not a typical experience. And that experience was over 2 days. It was the stuff that came out of that I could never have calculated. The stuff that came out of me and the stuff I processed in that journey was unlike any other medicine I've done. So I didn't know that. I prepared, I had intentions, I have a therapist, I have these things, but I was not prepared for what was going to come out of that journey, which was a lot of religious trauma came out of that. It was experienced, it was seen, it was felt, it was a visionary experience. And I think, yeah, there's just so much nuance. And I think the most important thing about a show like this is the conversations are important. And that's why we're having them. So it's, let's not sweep this under the rug. People are
Mm-hmm.
doing this and by the millions. So we need to talk about this, and we need to understand that, yeah, ketamine's legal. Ketamine assisted psychotherapy can be really profound and powerful, but that's not the only one. And it's not the only one people are doing. Underground, above, they're doing it. So let's talk about it. And bringing you on the show, like I was excited. I remember when we talked the first time, you were like, well, you've had so many amazing guests. What can I bring to the table? And I was like, well, there's a reason I reached out to you. And I can, we're more than halfway through this conversation, and you asking me questions about my own journey and your experience is really coming out about your own, your own take on this. And I think that's exciting. And I think one of the things that you didn't tell me about was your TED Talk. And
Mm.
so the TED Talk that I just stumbled across a few days ago, and I'm like, 1 million views? What? It came out 2 months ago. 1 million views on a TED Talk about psychedelics. That's a big deal, So I'm like, let me watch this. And of course, it makes sense why there's that many views once you see the TED Talk, which I think is like 11 minutes long. But it's, let's talk about your TED Talk, that, what psychedelics are and what they're not.
I love you bringing that up. I am so shocked and pleased that so many people are resonating with this talk and this idea that psychedelics aren't cures for anything. They're simply catalysts, that we are using these tools to remember who we are, to see clearly the stories that we've layered on top of ourselves, um, to be able to use this technology to um, see the patterns that we're stuck in with the repetitive thinking behaviors, and how effective this tool can be for people who are experiencing a wide range of human, from treatment resistant PTSD in veterans, or survivors of sexual trauma, to people experiencing end of life, both the people transitioning or dying and their friends and loved ones who are left behind, and how these tools, and I often call them entheogens. So when we use psychedelics in spiritual practices, that's the word I choose to use. How these entheogens can really help people connect with spirit, find their core, and take those new awakenings and awarenesses and insights into everyday life. Um, I love that, and I'm so grateful for the chance to have talked about it on a TEDx stage, and that their platform is able to reach so many people. Just fills me with joy. These conversations, going back to what you said, these conversations are important for me, and then they're important for us, and they're important as they ripple out. and theirs just happens to have a large ripple, and grateful for that.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's something else. It's something else. I've had a few friends who've done TED Talks, and even recently, and yeah, it's a million views. I think there's 10,000 likes. Like it's in 2 months. Like that is so just not normal. And I'm like, to think about why that's happening. And I mean, it's obviously really well done. It's a really well done TED Talk, and about psychedelics being catalysts, not cures. And in many ways it's simple too. It's like very simple, the message, but it's just, maybe it's the timing, I don't know, but in your delivery. But wow, a million views on a TED Talk in 2 months. It's, when I think about some of the people who has really inspired me, like Gabor Mate and some of these other people that have got some great TED Talks. And I think he has 12 million, but that's in like 5 years, 4 years. So I'm like, what's this one gonna do?
12 million is a big number. That's
That's a
and
big
he's
number.
phenomenal. Jesse, there's a hunger right now for transformation, and we're seeing what a wild time to be alive. So we have this mixture of kind of a technology revolution happening, while there's a political revolution happening, while there's a spiritual revolution or reformation, I would call it, happening. And we saw that beautiful religious leaders study come out of Johns Hopkins, where clergy were given, psychedelic naive clergy were given a dose of psilocybin. And like 96% said like this was a massive deal in their lives and made them better religious leaders. We are seeing, again, that 5 million number of people who chose to do large dose psychedelics last year. Many of which, I think 46% said those for spiritual purposes. It's a big number. We are living through a time where we have incredible wealth and security and all sorts of norms being broken. And what are we going to do when AI continues to evolve and 30-40% of the jobs that are out there today aren't going to be available? And we have vertical farming, and we have lab grown meat, and we have autonomous driving cars, and education available online at fractions of the dollar. So what an incredible time to be alive, and how different than what our parents and our grandparents lived through. And we get to be alive through this period and climate change. Regardless of how climate change happens, not important. It's happening. So all of this is the world we get to live in, is the reality of life as it is now. And it seems like an incredible time for the human species.
Yeah. I feel like in the last 3 weeks, AI has taken off, never mind the last couple of years. And I agree that the rate of change is happening so fast. There's just no way you could be prepared or ready for what's happening. And I think that's, even for me, someone who worked at Verizon for 14 years and been in the tech space. And it's like, even for me, I'm like, whoa, dude, these AI apps and what's happening and what they can do. It's where we're going to be in 2 years. It's pretty remarkable. And I think the other side of that is, what does my mom think of that in her 70s? How is the world changing for my brothers and they're in their 50s? And it's just such a fast growing, rapidly growing change. But and also, though, it's also mental health. Mental health is changing too. I'm watching many people struggle with their mental health, and most of it's on the low. But I know because of people who will share, or I'll know in different ways, and it makes me really excited about what's happening with psychedelics and the potential when they're done with, like you talk about, setting and a proper integration support. That could be one-on-one. That could be an integration guide. It could be a therapist that's trained in psychedelics, or it could be a community. And I think a lot of people are lacking community right now, and they're really lonely. And you wouldn't know that by meeting them. But I get plenty of people reaching out to me of like, I don't have a purpose now. I don't know what to do. And part of that is the AI revolution. It's scary. It's like, whoa, like, you know, it's just, I think people can do their own research and see where that is. And, where do we find spiritual connection? Where do we find that connection to love? And, I think that psychedelics can be part of that for many people, to connect them to the truth of themselves, of love, and maybe people don't understand that psychedelics can do that because they look at them as drugs. It's not part of me. It's not, but like you said, they're catalysts. They're not cures. It's some of these experiences bring you into love. They bring you into what you would call God and source. And I think in this time, in this day and age, right now, in this moment, is really important. I think can be really
so
important.
Yeah, it's so important to remember that a spiritual experience doesn't make a spiritual life. So that we use these beautiful, beautiful, powerful medicines to snap us out of the programming. And I'll speak for the I won't even speak of the us. I use these powerful medicines to snap me out of the programming, the 50 plus years of scarcity mindset. And there has to be more, and I'm not safe, and I'm not enough, and I need to do more, and I need to please more. It can snap me out of that, where I can then remember, no, 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 no. I'm a spiritual creature having a human experience, and I can have any experience I choose to have. And I am loved, and I am worthy, and I don't need to do anything to be those two things. And now, if I just look at myself, I can choose to move through the world with by giving and receiving love, or I can choose to move it being afraid of the things that are happening around me. But when I compare, that's when what's the expression? Comparison is the death of happiness. So when I start comparing, I can find myself in loops. I think we're going to see um, people who have a lot and people who have enough, and that gap is going to be tremendous. And I hope and believe that shift in consciousness to I have enough, and I get to spend more time with my family and more time with myself and more time being a creative beast, and that's enough. Versus I need to be the guy who has the most money and has the yacht and has the plane, and those things weren't going to bring me happiness anyhow. And I'm hoping that this transition of all of these things are going to bring us into as a species into a space where we can celebrate this new type of existence. And I know it's a strange transition we're going through. And I know and I guess the last thing I'll say here is I know I'm speaking from a place of incredible privilege. And I see that too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if people are listening to this podcast, in many ways, that's privilege. Most people, there's, to have a smartphone is a privilege. And I think that that's becoming more commonplace. Even people who I know who are homeless have a smartphone, and not all of them, but they do, and they could access YouTube and they could access a podcast like this. But let's be honest, like a lot of this is not accessible. Someone doesn't have 3,000 for a ketamine, 6 journeys of intramuscular ketamine, or a guided MDMA journey, which is looking like it's going to be $5,000 when it becomes legal, a session or around there. It's that's not accessible. But regardless, it's happening. Things are happening, and people are doing it, and they're doing it their own way, and they're doing it guided by others. And I think that's what's really important, is that if that is going to happen, whether the population is coming from literally I've on my journey of addiction, I have met many people who are homeless and many people who are amazing people. They're homeless and they're just trying to navigate through the Salvation Army buildings or different ways to come through, and they make it. Many of them make it through, and they build a life. And so whether the conversation is psychedelics for that group or psychedelics for the entrepreneur, the 10-figure, 9-figure entrepreneur, there's nuance in both, and there's expertise in both and experience and what that would be like. But of course, the accessibility and where this is going to continue to emerge with the legalities, I think it's very complex, and once again, it's happening. So I really like to bring guests on and to continue to talk about this and have a conversation that is, if someone did want to access these experiences and didn't have money, that they could reach out to you or me and figure out, how can I make that happen? And we could co-create a way to maybe make that happen. Can we do that for every person on the planet? No. But there's people, if they're willing and ready to, let's figure out a way. And I think that's how I got started. And maybe that's how you got started. I didn't know what I was doing, but there was a way and a path that revealed itself when I walked into the great mystery and didn't have the answers. In fact, the more that I try to control this path, the worse and harder my life gets when I try to set a 5-year vision and goals and everything into this. Now I can do, my episode that came out today, the most recent episode that I put out was, I talked about autosuggestion and like an affirmation that you speak into reality. Do I believe in that stuff? Absolutely. I do.
Absolutely. Every day.
Yeah. And I don't try to force the way that is going to be unfolding and happening. I don't go, well, I spoke it, so now it needs to happen this way, and it happens to happen by this. It's like I'm speaking that just so I can let the great mystery of source, God, nature, whatever, just reveal the next thing. And I think it also is really good for my nervous system and my way of life to be speaking. Words are powerful, way more powerful than what people can even imagine. So saying the words are powerful. But my point is that trying to control what happens in a psychedelic experience, or how I'm going to meet, a psychedelic and what's coming next. And, I don't know what's coming next with that. I can only be in the present and say, here's my memories of what's happened in these journeys, good, bad, all of it. If we're even going to call it bad, challenging. And I don't know what's coming next. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of just, this is where I am today. This is the work I do, and this is the work you do. And who knows, maybe there's a journey in Costa Rica or Argentina or the Netherlands. But I still, I still have, there's a part of me that wants to control everything, wants to control it. And if someone's listening to this right now and they're trying to control and how they're going to relieve their depression or relieve this hole in the soul of this, no, I don't have a purpose, or I'm stuck in this addiction, I would give this thing a chance where you sort of take the steps in action, but also let go of what the actual answers are going to be for your next evolution of your healing. And I never would have chose psychedelics, honestly. I never would have went this path, but it seemed to keep dripping into my experience as I resisted it. And what you resist persists. And so I ended up eventually just going, let me read and let me learn everything I can. Not everyone has to do that, but that's what I did. And here we are, 4 years later, I'm interviewing you on a podcast about psychedelics. Never thought the day would come like this. And that's kind of letting go to the great mystery. And, and I think that's also important with the healing of people and mental health and the spiritual quest. You don't know what you don't know. When you get into some of these experiences and what is revealed, I never in a million years would have been thinking that's what would have been shown to me, that memory, that pain, that, and
And how good it would be to see that, how good it is sometimes when we talk about seeing and feeling the sorrow of the world on a psychedelic, and then realizing I needed to see that to deeply know that we are all completely connected. And I needed to know to have a different level of understanding of how the world works. And I needed to know to remove pity and judgment, and recognize that, ooh, when I say, oh, I wish it wasn't happening for this person, that means I know better than nature and spirit for what that person needs. That's judgment. That's separation. And how do I tear down more walls that I put up that separate me from others? Beautiful book on this topic would be The Surrender Experiment by Mickey Singer. Surrendering into life, trusting that, oh my gosh, we don't have to do anything, and life can take a cell and make a baby, and we can. It's fascinating how life just brings things to us without us having to do anything for it. I loved your piece on affirmations when you're talking about that. That I study with a person, John Breckenridge. No internet presence. He lives in a cabin out in the woods, and every other week I go out and spend some time with him. And he encourages everybody he talks to every day say, "I'm a beautiful and wonderful man or woman, and I'm a perfect work in progress," and just to announce it and embrace it and take it. And so are you. And that is, I love those affirmations with no expectation that anything happens other than I'm reclaiming my power. I'm saying who I am in those affirmations, and I'm reminding myself through the vibration of voice, of what I know to be true. And then you brought up access, which I know you had Sean McAllister on, and I love the work that he's doing, particularly around the religious freedom and religious movements around the country. We talk a lot about the medicalization, the therapy, the therapeutic psychedelics, but in my mind, it's going to be these churches that really provide access to the masses. And if we can bring these discussions above ground, if we can find ways for our governments to allow collaborations between spirit and science, we can reduce risk even more, provide more people with access, have the people's desire for transformation of consciousness to occur, and us to move into this next phase of existence.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to the community too, right? Having like a church and something like where medicines are, you're not as worried about being arrested, and you're also being in a community of people. How rare is that? That's not where I've come from. That's not even anything I've ever experienced, even to this day in my psychedelic journey, is being part of a church and doing medicines with a church. And that's available here in Costa Rica. I have not got involved, but how game changing that could be for communities and people that wanted to come into an experience like that. And yeah, I think that's really something I haven't explored. And so
I see that a lot, where people think that they start saying, I want to do psychedelics where they're curious. I've been told that psychedelics can help me with blah, 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 whatever it is for them. And some of them find their way to these different communities, and they start with, okay, I'm going to do a psychedelic in a church process. Amazing. And then what they quickly realize is, okay, I started because of the psychedelic, and now I'm staying because of the community. I love this expression of I think it's a Ram Dass quote, where he says, we work on ourselves as a service to others, and we help others as a way of working on ourselves. And I believe when we do this type of work in community, as it has been done for thousands of years, we are working in this something greater than us and us. That both things are happening simultaneously. So I really do. I understand you had a very challenging experience with 5-MeO, and your opinions on that with group, and I respect that. And for me, I have found that doing this type of work in community has been really healthy for me. And that's, again, going back. And both are right. And both are okay. Of course they are.
Yeah, and both and I'm open to the newness of that experience as well, to be involved in that. And I think that's the other part, is like, just in this conversation, it's like, oh, I wonder what that would be like, actually, to be involved in a group of people like that are having that experience, and there's not worried about the cops smashing in the doors and arresting everyone. I think what an experience that could be. And um yeah, so it has my curiosity now too. And being in Costa Rica, it's a little different here. But I know that exists, and so maybe that's something I will explore as well. That my there's a part of all of us that wants to control, right? And so there's a part of me that wants to be like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. And I have to look at that. Why is that? And it could be just the vulnerability of doing that, a medicine in a group like that, and what that looks like based off what's happened in the past with me. So I think this is, once again, it's an opportunity to explore that. And I'm open, I'm open to that, what that would be like.
Oh, who knows? Maybe someday we'll get to do this together.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of my favorite parts about having a podcast is the people I get to meet and then stay in contact with and eventually meet up with. There's a few guests that live in Costa Rica. So
Yeah,
I'm
you
going to
had
be
Ben
visiting.
on.
What's that?
You had Ben Malcolm on, so he's
So
down
Ben,
near you.
yeah, and where I'm going to be visiting him in September. So yeah, it's what a dream, right? Like to have someone who's created a master guide for contraindications to keep people alive. That's how important they can be. And then I get to have, he lives, it's quite a drive, but it's not, it's worth the drive for us to hang out. And we've had many conversations. He's been on the show twice. So, what a gift for me to, once again, going back to safety, is one of the reasons I was so fascinated by Ben was because his comprehensive contraindications list with medications, SSRIs, and mixing psychedelics. How important is that? I mean, there's so many Americans on medications, and so they're curious about psychedelics and what could be the harm. Could it dull the effects? What is the? And here's a guy who's done it. So it's like to be able to have him in my life is really important because I have many people I love and care about who are on SSRIs, and I do know they're curious about it, about psychedelics. So it's just a beautiful synergy of my intentions and meeting people like yourself to continue these conversations, and having the resources like it's like, well, where do I get started? Well, let's see, Matt wrote a book called The Beginner's Guide to Psychedelics. So this might be a good place to start right here on Amazon. Do you have the audiobook too? Is it audio?
Not for that one. The audio for the Veterans Guide and with the audio for Psychedelics for Everyone. Stick with Ben for just a moment. For
All right.
those who are listening, if you're this far in and you're what one thing I love about Ben goes by the Spirit Pharmacist. That's what many of us know him as. His website, I think, is spiritpharmacist.com. What I love about Ben is that if you're listening and you're not sure because you've had something happen in your physical history, your mental history, you're on a prescription, you're taking a supplement, you're in chemo, something's going on and you're not sure if psychedelics would be relatively safe for you. He has nothing to sell you besides information. So anyone can go to his website and can choose to take a consultation, and you'll give him your medical data, and then you'll typically have a phone call, and he'll say, well, based on what I've seen here, these are the things you should know about. That's a very different experience than someone signing up for a retreat in Mexico and having that group do a medical intake and being like, yeah, you're fine, come on in. Or having a religious experience, or having an underground therapist who is, well, it's not malicious. They are selling you something. They have a seat that you are going to fill. And there might be inherently a conflict of interest with that. So I suggest anyone who has anything complicated whatsoever, go get your own medical intake from whether it's Ben, spiritpharmacist.com, or whether it's Emily Copa, or whether it's the Psychedelic Pharmacist Association, someone from that group, someone who knows and does not have any interest in your outcome of what you choose to do with that information. And I love that Ben does that. And I think he does that like 3 days a week. That's kind of a core piece of his Costa Rica living. I know he also teaches a master's class to people studying psychedelic pharmacology and other things, but he's really good at medical consultations.
Yeah, thanks so much for shouting out Dr. Ben Malcolm. He's yeah, absolutely check that out. And I think that goes back to the integral piece of this conversation. And the integrity is, what is our motivations, right? The motivation for me is to keep people safe from a world of destruction, trauma, addiction, mental health. It's the world I come from. It's the world that devastated my family. And so I want to keep people safe, whether they're cold plunging or doing psychedelics. So just so psychedelics just so happen to be very intricate, and there's many
Mm-hmm.
levels to this, and there's legality issues. There's so many things. So yeah, having, you as a resource, your books, your information, much of it's free. You can listen to podcasts that you've been on, but also having, yeah, Ben Malcolm's, if you wanted to just do a consultation with him, you could ask all of the questions, everything you could ever imagine about medicines you're on or your suicidality, anything, all of these questions that are
Tapering.
really,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, vitally important. And then of course he has incredible courses. So check out his courses too, which are so robust into all of these questions that probably people have answered in the course. So yeah, like I said, it is a privilege, right? It's a privilege to have access to people like Ben, but anyone can access Ben, and they can and utilize his services. And I think that yeah, it's becoming a family of people that are here to serve, here to help. And it's just, for me, that's very exciting because you know it's it just shows me there's really good people in the space, really good people in the world, and they want you to be able to find what you're looking for, which I'd probably guess is love, being seen, heard, and felt, and the basic needs that weren't met in childhood. They weren't met maybe in relationships you've had, but through these different transformational experiences, it can remind you of what's possible and what is real. And I think that's, for me, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And of course, I don't do psychedelics every day or every week or even every month. That's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out in nature. Whether I was in New Hampshire or in Costa Rica, I was by the river. I was earthing. I was
Mm-hmm.
cold plunging. I was doing cold showers. I was doing all these things, and I was journaling, and I was doing affirmations. I was doing all these things. And now with psychedelics, I do those things too. And whether I'm doing psychedelics or not, it doesn't make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Just another extension of what I believe is connecting me to love and connecting me to what is most important, which to me now, what's most important are my memories. Honestly, the older I get, I'm like, man, the memories are sacred,
Mm-hmm.
and creating new memories, you know? So I didn't always live like that, but that's what emerges, especially when you're in a medicine journey and they show you memories in the most vivid detail you can ever imagine that are 100% true. And that's really profound. I'm not hallucinating. I am having a profound experience of a memory that I cherish. So I think
And
sometimes,
sometimes we cherish, and sometimes they're really hard to look at,
yeah,
and both are important. Jesse, you brought up that nurse serving ketamine who's never experienced ketamine earlier. I think I just want to call out for you that what's apparent about you is that this is you are living your journey publicly, and you are saying, these are the things that I went through. These are the things I've learned through this. And this is how I'm processing it now. And I'm going to do this processing in conversation, in my business, in my personal life. I'm doing all of this. And I'm sharing all of this. And I think that's beautiful. And when it comes to people looking to do psychedelic work, it's really nice not because to have someone who is knowledgeable, not because they're going to tell you this is what this means or this is what exactly how you should do A, B, or C, but because they have experience on the river and they can say, okay, there's some rocks up here. And you may find this canoe better than the kayak. And that's important. So having that lived experience, doing this, knowing that, yes, you're helping others, but every time you're helping others, you're learning, healing, and growing yourself. And that's apparent. And approaching things from that perspective where I don't know what's better for you than what you do. I can just share my learning, healing, and growing and see what resonates and what sticks. When nobody can make someone else have any experience. And it comes through when you speak. And you've created a life with these beautiful people around you that are reflections of you. And I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I feel like this conversation today was me trying to get to know Matt, but if somehow I found more about myself through talking to Matt, and that says a lot about you as well. And so I think we're going to have to bring you back on the show and get to know Matt a little more. But I think in many ways, what we set out to do was accomplished today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll definitely have you back on again. I know you're up to a bunch of things in the world and want to bring you back in and check in and even hear more about your story. And I think that, for people listening, definitely we'll link the TED Talk in the show notes and your TED Talk and a link to your beginner's guide, the psychedelics, and whatever else you want to link. But we'll make sure we do that for the listeners so that they can have access to that if now they've become curious and or already been doing the research to see what's next for them on this path if they so choose or don't choose. Hopefully they're more informed.
I appreciate you doing that. And I think I would ask if someone is still listening an hour or some into this, what are you listening for? What permission are you looking to hear? What curiosity is still lingering that is holding you back from doing whatever it is that you know you want to do, whatever that is. It's a long time to listen. And I appreciate you listening. And I'll leave you with that question. But thank you, Jesse, for having me on. Thank you for doing this work. 78 episodes and the quality of people you're having on is incredible. And thank you for being a resource in the world for people who are looking for good information on how they might choose to navigate this path.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate that. And like I said, we'll have you back again and appreciate your time, Matt. And thanks again. And we will hold that space for that last part of what you just said. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. To be continued.
To be continued. Thanks, brother. Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.